Somebody famous, I can't remember, bumped into a friend and said, "What are you doing?" And the friend said, "I'm writing a novel." And the guy said, "Yes, neither am I." Writing a book is a bit like that. It's a good excuse. It gives the impression that you're busy. Everybody knows books take a long time, so you can easily slouch around for a few months or a year or two and nobody knows any better. So I'm kind of writing that kind of. That's not strictly true. I'm on it, on and off. Take time. But the book is called Live Well, Live Long, or will be called Live Well, Live Long. And the subject of the book is, it's based on the Chinese Yang Sheng tradition, which I'll explain a bit more if you don't know. But broadly, the tradition, the Chinese tradition of being well. How to be well as far as possible. How to live as long as life as possible under the conditions and circumstances that you receive depending on the constitution and where you were born and so on. Now, within the Yang tradition, different factors are emphasized. Diet, exercise, sex, sleep, and so on. But usually coming first is the mind and the emotions. So this talk this afternoon is about my understanding of the role of the mind and the emotions in being well, in extending lifespan if possible, and being joyful if possible. Okay. So the idea that the mind affects the body, affects the health of the body, goes back a good 2,500 years in Chinese culture. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. Yes? Yeah. Just. Somebody before had a mic, but they haven't given you one. Oh, okay. Let me shout for now, and then if it's a problem, wave and I'll sort it out. Is it a problem yet? Okay. Now, so nearly 2,500 years ago, this text, I don't know if anybody knows the early Taoist texts. We all know, I assume we all know the Tao Te Ching. But another very similar text that appears around the same time is the Nei Ye. This Nei means inner, inward, like Nei Gong, inward training. And this is a Taoist text of self-cultivation. Very beautiful, very short. Like the Tao Te Ching, it's written in poetic form. And if you're interested in these things, I very much encourage you to get it, to get the book. It's really a wonderful, inspiring little book. This is the version I know. It's called Original Tao, and it's translated by Philip Roth. Thank you. Sorry about this. You know where the arms are gone? Ah. Hello? Boop, boop, boop. No, there's no, usually there's a switch on for which one? No, it's the battery.
Oh, yeah.
That's the battery case. Hello, hello? Hello, hello? Can you hear me in the back now? Where were we? Oh, yes, so we're familiar perhaps, you know, if you have an interest in spiritual traditions, say going back to Eastern spiritual practices, Buddhism, for example, Taoism, we're very familiar with the idea that working with the mind and the emotions, we might gain wisdom. Even in the Taoist tradition, we might gain a kind of slightly ill-defined immortality. But what this says very clearly, and we'll see that this is very much part of the Chinese tradition, is that if we keep our minds, if we work with our minds and keep our minds stable and wholesome, then the body becomes healthy. Yeah? This is the route to bodily health. And this is clearly repeated in the Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Classic. There's something I want to say about the Yellow Emperor's Classic, the Neijing, is maybe we take it for granted, maybe we don't read it. I don't know. I think the Neijing was the first thing I ever read on Chinese medicine. How does it open? How does the Neijing open? Yeah? As it lays down its key message on the very first page of the Neijing. It's about how to live. Yeah? It's not about how to diagnose a cough or where to put a needle. It's about how do we live. Why don't people live out their allotted lifespan? Yeah? Why are not people not still vigorous and strong at the age of 100 as they used to be in some dim, distant past? Why is it that at the time of writing, by the age of 50, they're decrepit? It's because we don't live right. So Neijing is a book, it's a young Shen book, primarily. And this is what it says in chapter 1, talking about these perhaps mythical sages, or these idealized human beings. They lived in harmony with heaven and earth. They handled their cravings and desires. They made every effort to achieve peaceful relaxation, and they considered self-realization a success. Not the amassing of wealth or fame, but self-realization. And as a result, their physical body didn't deteriorate, and their essence and their spirit did not dissipate. So this is laying down the idea that if we handle our mind and emotions right, then our body will respond. Here's another quote from, this is an older text quoted in the 7th century Yangming Yangxing Lu. It says, the fact that people don't live out their full destiny, that means they don't live as long as they should do or could do, and die young, is because they don't love or cherish themselves. We don't look after ourselves. We exhaust ourselves with anger and competitiveness and fame and profit. And so we accumulate toxins and battle our own spirit. Now, I don't know if anybody's, have you read Ted Kaptchuk's The Web That Has No Weave? Yeah. He I think it's in there in the introduction, he quotes this, but he gets it wrong. It's bothered me for a long time. I used to give this lecture and I used to say, he quotes Sun Tzu Miao actually, because this book is possibly written by Sun Tzu Miao, nobody quite knows. The way he says it is the reason people don't live long is they are not loved. And I always thought that doesn't sound Chinese. And it's not a very, it's not certainly not a Sun Tzu Miao kind of saying, you know, it's very New Age and open heart, loving kind of idea. It's not part of the Taoist tradition. So Ted got it wrong. It's not that we don't live long because we're not loved. It's we don't live long because we don't love and look after ourselves. So what? I've got a feeling it's gone off. Sorry? Yeah. I've still got my red light on. So. Have I gone quiet again?
Yeah. Between the flex.
Yeah. No battery, it says. Yeah, battery's gone.
Bear with me. I've got to. I've got it. Should work. Found it. Found it.
So, what is this talk? What am I going to cover in this talk? I'm going to look at what factors affect our health and longevity in general, how excess of the emotions can cause disease.
Hello.
Something.
Hello. There we go. There you go. Good. All right.
Okay.
Got you two inappropriately. Leave you with that.
Hello. Good. How excess of the emotions can cause disease, and of course, a lot of this is revision. You know, some of us are getting quite long in the tooth, so it's kind of a long time since we sat in acupuncture college and heard how excessive anger and excessive grief and so on can injure the body. I want to come back and just look at that again. Look at it a little bit more and look at some of the evidence for it. Then we're also going to look at the idea that if excessive emotion is harmful, should we try and get rid of our emotions? No, of course not. Because we look at the importance of free emotional expression. That's very much emphasized in the tradition. We'll look at how to regulate our emotions and our mind, how to do it in practice, and we'll look at the value of cultivating positive emotions. So first, just a quick overview of what factors determine our health and longevity. Why are some people healthy, some people not healthy, some people live long, some people don't live long. Okay? Very basic stuff. I've got a feeling by the end of this lecture you'll say, well, I didn't actually hear anything new. And that's okay, because this is good, solid stuff, so we're just kind of going back inside some of the profound wisdom, in my opinion, the profound wisdom of Chinese medicine. So I've schematically divided it into three parts: constitution, luck, and behavior and lifestyle. Of course, we are only in charge of this part. This is the bit that we can work with. Yeah? So the constitution, the Neijing, says a person takes the mother as foundation and the father as roof beam. The roof beam is what holds up the roof. Yeah? So without a foundation or without a roof beam, there's no house. Yeah? This means that Neijing is observing that we inherit constitutional strength and weakness from our parents. We know from, just incidentally, this is repeated throughout the first few centuries of the Common Era in Chinese texts. They observed that something is inherited from the parents. They use the term jing, or they use the term qi. And if you get a lot of it, you live long, and you're strong, and your body's strong, and you're healthy. And if you don't get a lot of it, your body's weak, you're more likely to get ill, and you're going to die more quickly. And this wasn't actually demonstrated in research until the work of Alexander Graham Bell, who, as you also know, invented the telephone. Yes, the inventor of the telephone. But he was also a genealogist. And he was the first person to look into this. He took the records of about 7,000 descendants of an American guy called William Hyde, who died in the 17th century, and looked at their longevity and their parents' longevity, and he observed there was a 40% difference in lifespan between people whose parents lived long and people whose parents lived short. And a number of studies were conducted in the same fields of the 20th century, and the prevailing opinion now is you get 2 to 5 extra years of life for every 10 extra years your parents lived. If you take from the age that your parents conceived you, gave birth to you. Every 10 years, they live beyond that and confer on you 2 to 3 to 5 extra years of life. Of course, if your parents died in accidents or other circumstances, then you look to your grandparents. That's also important. Okay? And that is our inherited pre-heaven gene. And we know that this gene, this pre-heaven gene, is the foundation of our physical and mental development. Yes? The gene is not strong, the mind won't develop properly, you have poor mental development, retardation, and so on. And of course, we know that pre-heaven gene is responsible for the development of the body, of fertility, of proper puberty, of a strong and healthy sexual libido, and so on. Particularly strong constitution means that a person will not get ill so often, they won't need to sleep very much. We look at many famous and powerful people who, by definition, have strong constitutional gene. They wouldn't be leaders, business leaders and political leaders if they didn't have phenomenal constitutions. And most of them, we find, only need to sleep 4 or 5 hours a night and never get sick, they don't catch colds and so on. And what goes along with that, along with these physical characteristics, is a naturally strong, stable and resilient shell or spirit. If we have a strong constitution, the spirit is likely, I use that word with shell interchangeably, I'm not an academic when it comes to defining the exact meaning of these terms, I use it in the kind of more everyday sense we do in Chinese medicine. You have a robust shell. So take this woman, Thatcher, who visited China before she became Prime Minister and was introduced to a woman of the old school, Madame Chow En-lai. Chow En-lai was Mao Zedong's intellectual mate running the Communist Party. Mao was a peasant, Chow En-lai was an intellectual, his wife was a lady from the old school. She was very elderly. When Thatcher met her, she was sitting in a chair and Thatcher was brought in and Madame Chow looked at her, looked at the shape of her head, and the first thing she said, I must congratulate you on your phenomenal constitution. Because this is, as we know, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, in Chinese tradition, the constitution is judged from the structure and shape of the face. So she has a very strong, square face. So what did this mean? It meant that she was very robust, she had masses of energy, she didn't need to sleep much, and she had a very, very resilient spirit. In Brighton, where I live, she was blown up. The bomb, 4 o'clock in the morning, what was she doing? She was working. She went to the bathroom, came back, the bomb blew up through the bathroom. 5 minutes later, she's on the pavement, every hair in place, her voice completely calm. They will not get away with this. If anybody's been in shocking circumstances like that, most of us, our spirit is not robust enough to do that. We get too shocked. So a robust spirit here doesn't necessarily mean a sensitive spirit. It doesn't mean a person is compassionate or kind. It simply means the spirit is incredibly strongly rooted in the heart. And this comes from constitutional strength. And I'm sure when those lamas go out seeking the next Dalai Lama, that's one of the things they look for in a baby. The story is they're looking for the reincarnation. Yeah, perhaps, but they're also looking for a baby who shows the signs of having a very strong constitution and a strong shell, like the Dalai Lama has, and you can see it from the square shape of his head. But so that's our constitutional inheritance. But one of the great discoveries of Chinese medicine is that this innate constitution we receive from our parents is affected during the time our mother was pregnant with us. And this comes under the heading of Tai Jiao. Tai Jiao means literally fetal education. And it's the observation that the conditions of pregnancy, the mental and physical conditions of pregnancy, will impact on the constitution and therefore the constitutional spirit of a baby. Now this was, this appears to my knowledge the first reference I've seen to it is in the Neijing. Zhu Danxi talks about it, he says, the mother and the fetus share the same body, they have the same bloodstream. So of course, if the mother becomes hot, the child becomes hot. If the mother becomes anxious, the child becomes anxious. This was, although this was clearly part of European cultural folk knowledge, like many pieces of wisdom, it was put aside in Western medicine. It was considered through most of the 20th century that what happened during this time had no effect at all on the health of a child. How extraordinary is that? As far as they were concerned, only two things affected a baby's health, and that was genes and lifestyle from the time the baby was born. But this all changed in the 1980s with the work of a British professor, Richard Barker. It was the first person, David Barker, I think, first person to look into this, and he simply did some research that came up with the observation that children born with a low birth weight had lifetime worse health than children born with a higher birth weight. And that opened the doors to lots of research. So, I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's just go back and talk about the Chinese tradition first. It emphasizes, Taijia emphasizes care of emotions, diet and exercise through pregnancy. A lot of rubbish appears in Taijia. A woman, for example, when she's pregnant, has to sit up straight, must only eat regular shaped food, should not look at monkeys or hunchbacks, should surround herself with beautiful servants, not ugly ones, and so on. So, you know, of course, there's a lot of accretion of a lot of rubbish, but the core ideas. So here, this is from Sun Tzu Miao's, it's translated by Sabine Wilms, if you know her, Sun Tzu Miao expert. This, just briefly, it gives behavior for the pregnant woman during the 9 months of pregnancy. And we'll see if we look at the first 3 months, in fact, also the 4th month, that the key emphasis is that a woman has to, as far as possible, be free from anxiety, from fear, from shock, from emotional disturbance. Yes? It's considered terribly important. Later on in the pregnancy, it's not emphasized so much. So once you start getting into the middle and later stages of pregnancy, diet becomes important, and so does exercise. And that's really interesting because, of course, through most of the medieval period and right into modern medicine, women were very much advised against taking exercise during pregnancy. In Victorian times, women shouldn't brush their own hair because they might strain the ligaments of the womb, for example. Even though in the Bible, in Exodus, as a matter of interest, it observes that the Hebrew slave women have much easier births than their Egyptian mistresses, because they're always working and scrubbing the floor. So, the first 3 to 4 months, this big emphasis on remaining emotionally calm. And now there's a whole stack of research. We know that, first of all, if a woman experiences medium to severe emotional stress during pregnancy, the child is much more likely to experience emotional or cognitive problems, anxiety, ADHD, and so on. And that the bulk of the studies indicate that it's in the first part, the first trimester, or possibly into the second trimester, that these have the maximum effect. They've done studies, for example, on women who lost a close relative, suffered a bereavement during pregnancy. If it occurred in the first 3 or 4 months, it had significant effects on the emotional well-being of the child, even at the age of 8 or 9. They're much less likely to sleep well, they're more anxious and nervous. But if it happened later in pregnancy, it didn't have such a strong effect. Incidentally, I haven't done a handout for this, but if anybody wants the material that is on these slides, after the lecture or at the end, I'll give you my email address. Send me an email and I'll send you the material. Oh yeah, this is the study I just mentioned. And this very early emotional stress that can occur during pregnancy or in the very early years of life, of course, may not manifest straight away. This comes from my clinical observation, and I'm sure we all have this experience. A child can have a potential emotional vulnerability that comes from the time of pregnancy, or possibly from very early life, that is not revealed until a person is challenged, experiences a challenge of some kind. I first noticed it because I had a number of patients over a short period of time who went to university and suffered breakdowns. We know that a lot of university students have difficulty coping emotionally. There's a higher rate of depression and potentially a higher rate of suicide. And this is because children are leaving, or young people then are leaving the security of their family and the security of their home. And if there is a vulnerability there, it can be revealed at this stage. Does this tie in with your experience? No? Similarly, if we take something like skunk, there's a lot of talk about skunk, this modern version of cannabis that, unlike the cannabis that I may or may not have tasted back in the 1970s, is associated with triggering psychosis. Yeah? This is because there's an underlying vulnerability that comes from very early time. Yeah? So I think these things are all important in understanding. I'm going to try and keep pushing this towards having clinical value in this lecture rather than just intellectual interest. And for me, the greatest enjoyment in Chinese medicine, which I don't practice anymore, the greatest enjoyment, even greater than sticking needles in and people saying that they felt better, which did happen sometimes, was understanding. Yeah? Using the tools of Chinese medicine to understand life, to understand people's human life, how it works. Yeah? That's what really fascinated me. That's what fascinates me now. Any questions about Constitution? This can be two-way this afternoon, so don't be shy if you want to say something or ask something.
I mean, I've been asked if, in situations where a child's experienced violence against a mother, they become violent in later years. Is that something that could be related? Like when you're pregnant and you've been beaten up, and then later in life these emotions come out in the child?
With regard to violence during pregnancy, I've not seen any research on that. No, I don't know. Right. And I've not had experience either, so I can't say.
Yeah, it's a question that was asked in a situation that I was aware of. Yeah.
Do you think that acupuncture or other therapies can redress some of the issues that come about during this time?
Okay, it's a big question.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. I got into trouble a few years ago because I wrote kind of editorial for the British Acupuncture Council newsletter in response to some stuff I'd read by Lonnie Jarrett. And Lonnie Jarrett seemed to be among a fairly substantial group of acupuncturists, and there might be some here, and I don't want to offend anybody, who held out the idea that if you select the right needle and pop it in the right place, it can somehow unravel deep childhood issues, deep emotional traumas, long-standing emotional patterns. Okay? So this was the idea. And I firmly didn't believe it then, and I firmly don't believe it now. Okay? Because perhaps like many of us, I've had experience of self-development, let's call it that. Been involved with self-development for several decades. I had a period in my life when I did a lot of personal therapy and group therapy. I've seen the sweat and blood and work that people do year after year after year to kind of deal with and transform and change some of these problems that they have. Yeah? The hard labour, the courage, the ego courage people need to do this. And it just simply doesn't add up, in my view of the world, that this can all be bypassed by somebody popping a needle in the right acupuncture point. So on a deep level, no, but I do feel that when human beings look after each other and care for each other and try to heal each other, a lot can happen. A lot of assistance can be given, but not at that level. I mean, not to that degree, not the working of magic. That's my own view. Okay, so the second thing is luck, and I do realise I realise I've written a 6-hour lecture, not a 3-hour lecture. The rate we're going. Luck is important. I only want to stress luck because there's a risk that once we know that we have some influence on our own health, once we know that behaviour affects health, it's easy to get a bit fascistic about it. Towards ourselves. I'm ill because I've been bad. I'm ill because I can't control myself. I'm ill because I haven't behaved well. Or you're ill. You have breast cancer because you didn't eat right. And you have breast cancer because you didn't exercise. Luck plays a big part. Yeah? Luck plays a very big part in health and disease. After all, it's luck. The parents we ended up with, and the constitution and the specific constitutional weaknesses we might have inherited. It's luck whether our mother experienced shock and trauma during pregnancy, or she didn't eat right, or she smoked, or she drank, and so on. It's luck if we were born into a family with parents that loved us and cuddled us and cared for us, or into a family that is cruel and harsh. These things affect, we know, they affect a person's health right through their life. And these things are luck. We live in a nice, peaceful Western country like Britain where there's loads of food and drink and we don't have wars and epidemics and so on. And we're not exposed to severe environmental toxins. All these things, it's luck. It's luck whether we have a nice, peaceful acupuncturist job, luck up to a point, you know, or whether we have to work nights in a grim factory somewhere, or work in a very stressful environment and so on. So luck plays a part. And then there's behaviour. And this is obviously what we're interested in, because this is the part we can affect. So I just want to go back to a quick bit of theory. We talked about constitutional gene. This is called pre-heaven gene. And the idea that this pre-heaven gene determines lifetime health and longevity. But it's not the only kind of gene. Right? Remember the other kind of gene? Post-heaven gene. So where does post-heaven gene come from? Post-heaven gene comes from what we start from the chi that we generate, chi and blood we generate from the moment of birth. We're born, we breathe, we eat, we start making chi. Yes? If our organs are healthy, we eat well, we live well, we handle our emotions well, we create surplus chi and blood. We don't use we manufacture chi and blood from the environment well, we don't use it all up all the time, and the surplus, when we rest, when we sleep, when we meditate, is transformed into gene. That's the teaching. Yeah? And that post-heaven gene supplements pre-heaven gene. So this shows that even if a person is born with a weaker constitution, if the lifestyle is good, they can add to their health and they can add to their lifespan. My wife is a yoga teacher. Just recently, BKS Iyengar died. At the age of 93, you know Iyengar yoga? So he was a very, very sickly child. He had tuberculosis. He was a real sickly, weedy little thing, and he took up yoga. And then, you know, he was still doing headstands and arm stands at the age of 90. This is an example of how living well can transform the conditions, the inherited conditions. So people born with weaker constitutions can strengthen their overall health and increase their longevity. And people born with strong constitutions can, of course, dissipate. Wonderful word, dissipation. It means being kind of wild and naughty and reckless, but actually it means waste. To dissipate, you waste. You waste your constitution.
So, my question is, does it matter at what age you recognise that you need to do something about your lifestyle? Because our patients come to us at different ages, and if we talk to them about lifestyle, can we assure them that if they make some changes, they can start to do something to their post-heaven gene that is going to help
Okay.
them?
Did you hear that? Yes? Okay. Well, there is, I didn't bring it, there's a quotation from, you know, one of these old, wise Chinese guys going, you know, people, they're stupid. They're really stupid, and they ignore their body and they ignore the dam. By the time they realise, it's too late. But it's not actually true. Okay, it's not true, because what we know, if you look, you know, the British government has published a really interesting paper called 5 Times a Week. You know, they first published, they first published 5 a day, which was about diet, which is actually really good. It's really worth looking at. And then they published 5 a week, which was about exercise. And one part of that is exercising in the elderly. And we know, even at the age of 70, even at the age of 80, if people take up exercise, they increase their muscle bulk and they extend their life. They've done studies in old people's homes. They get whoever wants to, starting exercising regularly, they live much longer than the people who don't exercise at all. So actually, it's never too late.
That study showed exponentially decreased old age diseases, type 2 diabetes, the arthritis, and cardiovascular diseases.
Yes. Well, in fact, you know, modern gerontological thinking is that most diseases that we used to call diseases of old age are actually diseases of inactivity. And they're not fundamental to old age. They're just because people stop using their bodies and their minds, and they don't eat well, and so on. Okay, so I told you it's repetition, cause of disease in Chinese medicine, the external factors and the internal factors. Yeah? The 7 emotional factors. And all these others. These are called the miscellaneous factors, and actually all of these can, in combination, affect our mental and emotional state. We know, for example, that physical and mental overwork, stress at work can affect the stability of the shen. Lack of exercise can lead to depression. Traumatic injury can obviously cause shock, we'll look at that, and so on. So all of them can affect the spirit and the emotions to varying degrees. So, how can we maximize our chances of being healthy and living long? This is yang sheng. This is the subject that I'm writing about. Yang sheng literally means nourishment of life. And I've got the image of a chair here because when I was a young student, I had a teacher, a very lovely teacher, whom I and everybody else was totally head over heels in love with. Therefore, I remember every word she said. She used to tell patients, she said, health is like the 4 legs of a chair. And when a chair's got 4 legs, it's nice and stable. Lose just 1 leg and it already becomes a bit rickety. 2 legs, it's getting on for useless, and so on. So what are the 4 legs of the chair, or the 4 main legs of Yang Shan? 1 is the mind, cultivation of the mind and the emotions. 2 is diet, including tea and alcohol. 3, any idea? Exercise, cultivation of the body with work, rest and exercise. 4, no. Something simple, something we do every day. Sleep. Sleep. Okay, so those are the 4 main legs of the chair. So we often find people who manically cultivate their body and neurotically control their diet, and their emotions are a complete mess. That's quite common. As well as affairs in the bedroom and how to live when you're old and so on. So Yang Shan comes from Taoist, Confucian and Buddhist sources. It comes from medical classics, and it comes from folk medicine. These are the sources of it. So, yeah, working. What's good? When do we have a break? 2:30, 4 o'clock, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So working with the mind and the emotions. So the Su Wen says that when the mind is in disorder, a disease cannot be healed. So what about the Neijing? Now we may, let's first, what does the Neijing say? The Neijing compares the body to the empire, yes? It says within the body the heart is the emperor, and the various organs are officials who all have their work to do. And the Taoist idea and the Confucian idea, and this is why Confucius and supposedly Lao Tzu, if he existed, and also others, went around trying to find a king or an emperor to be an advisor to. Yes? That was what they wanted to do. They wanted to be an advisor to a leader. Why? Because they believed that if the leader was calm and wise and centered in themselves, their kingdom, their empire would just spontaneously be harmonious. Everything would unfold as it should if the emperor was wise and controlled his desires and so on. So this image is taken to the body. So the Neijing tradition says if the heart, that means the residence of the Shen, is healthy, calm, centered, then the body will perform its functions, the officials will perform their functions without trouble. Everything will work normally and will be healthy. This is a 16th century book. The sage regards his or her body like a country. The heart is the ruler, the Jing and the Qi are citizens. If the heart doesn't abuse its superior position, if it remains centered and focused on essential matters, then everything will flourish. Intruders, that means disease, will be beaten off. The dantian will be full of treasures, and every part of the body landscape will be light and at peace. That sounds good, doesn't it? I'll have some of that. And again, this is a Taoist text. If the spirit is at peace, the heart is in harmony, and the heart is in harmony, the body is whole. So we need to regulate the spirit first. So this is the Neijing tradition. Yeah? We must remember, though, just out of interest, the Neijing tradition is only one tradition in Chinese medicine. The Taoist tradition is different, and the Taoist tradition doesn't emphasize the central role of the heart, it emphasizes the central role of what? Instead of the heart, but the brain. Yeah? That's why in acupuncture, it's quite interesting, in acupuncture, when you want to treat the shen, we have two ways, broadly. Yeah? We treat through the heart channel, pericardium channel, front move, back shu points of the heart, yeah? Heart 7, and yet also, what do we treat? We treat the do-9. We treat do-20, we treat do-24. We treat channels, once we start looking at the classical uses of points, a lot of points that have strong hyper-emotional symptoms, symptoms of mania and schizophrenia and so on, are channels that go to the brain. So it's two different traditions sitting alongside each other. So, also, this is my addition to this, and this is very obvious and terribly important. Unless and this is why the mind and emotions are so primary in Yangshan, unless the spirit is stable, right? Unless we're centered, unless we're able to observe, accept, work with our own nature, we're insight, unless we have insight, we can't be healthy, we can't follow a healthy lifestyle. How many people try to be healthy? How many people sign up for gym memberships, resolve to go on diets, decide to do yoga every day, decide to meditate every day, and then undermine themselves? Happens all the time, because we're not starting with the right necessary requirement, which is a stable spirit, stable and centered and resolute shen. So this is why a very important reason that cultivation of the mind comes first in Yangshan. You can't really look after yourself properly unless you're centered and whole. You have to be whole inside. And you have to cherish yourself. People don't love or cherish themselves. So just an aside, I think in the Chinese tradition, and we can observe it if we look at life, there are sort of two ways to cultivate the shen. One is directly and one is indirectly. This is the Chinese tradition. What does direct cultivation of the shen mean? Let's take as an example meditation. Yeah? The Neijing says if you make the heart healthy, that means the shen, the body will be healthy. So just meditate. Yeah? Just meditate and the body will look after itself. Is that true? It's kind of true. It has some truth to it. But look what happened. Look at Shaolin Gong Fu. Does anybody know the story of how Shaolin Gong Fu started? The myth is that somebody, and I think it could even have been Bodhidharma, I don't know, turned up at the Shaolin monastery to find these fat, asthmatic, lazy monks who couldn't walk 100 meters because all they did all day is sit and meditate. Yeah? And they developed Shaolin Gong Fu as a result to get them healthy. That's the myth of the story. Okay? So another we find very much in the Chinese tradition is that actually we work with the Jing and Qi. And in this case, the Jing means the body. We cultivate the body, that's Jing, and we cultivate the Qi, that's breath, and we simply allow the mind to be quiet. And that causes the shen to flourish. Yeah? That's the second idea. Okay? Now, as with all these polarities, they're both true, and it's probably true that the best is a mixture of the two. Yeah? But if anybody's got anything to say about this, do, because it's just like something I'm kind of thinking about at the moment. I mean, I'll give you an example. I came across a French female psychologist from the 1970s who came up with this concept she used the word hardiness. Hardiness. not a very good word maybe. And she defined hardiness as a mixture of qualities like self-reliance, courage, the ability to regard difficulties as challenges. Yeah? These are what we'd call good things, yes? Hardiness. And this idea persisted, and for example, I came across a study how being in nature cultivates hardiness. So for example, wilderness training, trekking, windsurfing. Yeah? When you're out in nature, even gardening. You know, gardening has an extraordinary effect on people's spirit. There's the physical activities, the fact that you're out and sometimes it's cold and sometimes it's warm. You need a little bit of hardiness. It's the fact that you encounter continual difficulties because the bloody slugs, and the snails and the rabbits and the birds and the cats and the, sorry. This is very personal to me. Eat your vegetables. It's like develops hardiness. Okay? And I've been doing quite a lot of recently, last few years, training in the internal martial arts, the ultimate expression of which could be, you know, how to beat the shit out of somebody. Although I don't go there. That's an area that I don't really go to. And so I therefore asked myself, well, actually, why am I doing this? And one reason is, you know, health, physical health. The other, I started to understand. You develop what they call warrior spirit. Yeah? Warrior spirit. And warrior spirit is not about fighting. Warrior spirit is a way of dealing with life. Yeah? Warrior spirit, and so I'm kind of going a bit erratic, but I hold against my... I've had the fortune or misfortune for many years to encounter a lot of New Age people. So when I meet with hard-edged scientists, I feel terribly New Age. But when I meet with New Age people, I feel very much like a hard-edged scientist, and it's kind of, I never feel I quite belong. But people talk about spirit a lot in the New Age. They talk about opening the heart, and they talk about kind of miracles, and they talk about all kinds of things. And I think that's not what that's got nothing to do with what I think of as spirit. To me, spirit is really, really about stability. Yeah? A really healthy spirit. In my mind, when my spirit is healthy, I'm centered, I'm in the moment, yeah? I'm resolute, I have hardiness, I'm functional, I'm able to deal with this, and I'm able to deal with that. I'm able to open my heart when my heart needs to be opened, and I'm able to close it when it doesn't need to be opened. Very, very ordinary things. This is warrior spirit. Yeah? So when we talk about cultivating spirit, there is this tradition in the Chinese tradition that you do physical practice, you do breathing, you do perhaps internal qigong, neigong training, and the Shen flourishes of itself. Yeah? Have I made any kind of sense with that? Because it's thinking in process at the moment for me. Okay. Regulating the emotions. So what does this mean? It means that we have to cultivate peace of mind and gain some level of control over our emotions. And at the same time, allowing the emotions to flow freely. Quite a difficult task. Yeah? A narrow path to thread. We don't want to resort to indulge in excessive emotion. On the other hand, we mustn't suppress the emotions. We want to learn to stay in the present, to cultivate the ability to be in the present moment. And we want to cultivate positive emotions. Compassion, laughter, friendship, intimacy, love, and perhaps not happiness, perhaps, what would be a better word, do you think, than happiness? Contentment, yeah, contentment, absolutely. I have to say, a lot of the stuff about Yang Sheng is written by old guys, you know, and they're always going, no, don't follow your lusts, don't follow your passions. And of course, old guys don't tend to have that many lusts and passions. But I was talking to a friend, a male friend the other day, or maybe reading something. I was reading something. This guy was saying what a joy it was that his testosterone had died down. This kind of testosterone that drove him constantly on a sort of, you know, made him constantly dissatisfied, constantly hunting. Hunting for what? Sex and love and excitement and thrill and danger and all that kind of. Finally died down, and how he discovered the art of being contented. I don't know if there's a female equivalent to that. Sorry? Who said that? You cynic. Those pesky emotions. Yeah.
A question on your previous slide about regulating emotions. Can you say a little bit more about what you understand by detachment from emotions?
Yeah.
Because I think often in personal reflection and also in people I've observed and in patients who attempt to detach from their emotions, some people can become perhaps a little cold or distant. I think sometimes there can be a little misunderstanding about what's really meant by detachment.
I agree completely. If you wait a bit, I think I'll cover it, and if that doesn't cover it, let's talk about it again. Yeah? So this is pretty strong stuff, the Annals of Master Lu, and I'm going to tell you a story about Master Lu in a moment. But the difference between being in command and losing command of emotions is the root of life and death, the starting point of living and dying. So that's a pretty definite kind of statement. So just a word about this extraordinary book. This is the Lu She Chun Chu, anyway, it's the Annals of Master Lu. Master Lu was a very interesting character. He was a merchant who asked his father when he was young, what's the route to great wealth? And his father said, well, you have to become an advisor to the emperor. Young Master Lu said, all right, that's what I'll do. And through bribery and machination, he became principal advisor to the king of Qin region. And under Lu, his name is Lu Wubei, when he was in this position of power, he persuaded the king to summon great scholars from all over the kingdom and to write down everything that was known in this book.